they would they would live. I mean, they lived for extremely long time. I mean, they lived for hundreds of years. I think in several cases where they lived for 500 years and then begat sons and daughters. And then they would live for another 100 years and begat a son, and I, that you can see that in I guess in Genesis. Well, you can see it in chapter 11, verse 10 going to 10 through 26, where it's talking about the descendants of Shem. But I just thought that was interesting, seeing those generations, how long these people live. Okay, a space problem develops. Okay, right here, Abram and Abram, Sarah, and Lot. They've left their homeland. By this time, Abram's nephew, who also becomes prosperous, for we read in Genesis 13:5, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had
flocks
and
herds
and
tents.
Okay, so Lot also had was wealthy. In verse 6 says that the land was not able to bear them, but they might dwell together, for their substance was great. So they could not dwell together. The herdsmen then began to quarrel over the land, and Abram, wise and righteous man that he was, wanted to solve the problem with little confusion as possible. Therefore, he suggested that they separate. In verse 7 is a point that we might overlook, but it is very important one. Namely, that the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt in the land. Abram was among unfriendly people who would delight in knowing about any problems among his own people. Such problems could divide his people and make them more vulnerable to attack. Besides, it would not be setting a good example before unbelieving neighbors to have division among God's people. The same is true of God's people today. So the land, well, we'll get this later, but the land that they're in, Abraham and Lot, they're just passing through this land. They'll go here and then they'll go, they'll be going somewhere else, and then they went somewhere else, and they come back here. And the people that dwelt in that land, they were the lesson said it was among unfriendly people, but they were people that would have, if they saw the opportunity, they would have attacked. They would have attacked Abram and Lot. What was the solution to the problem according to verse 9?
To separate.
Okay. Separate ourselves. He told, Abram told Lot, you go to the left and I'll take the right. You go to the right and I'll take the left. It didn't make him any difference. But he wanted a peaceful way to solve their dilemma. In verses 10 and 11 tell why some felt that Lot was very considerate.
Was not
not.
was not very, I'm sorry, was not very considerate of Abram.
Lot chose the plain of Jordan that was well watered and fertile.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
You know, Lot, he chose what he thought was the best land.
Best. Right.
Mhm.
And it was, the plains, they were, well watered and just, he thought he was getting the best end of that deal.
Mm-hmm.
From verses 12 and 13 tell why Lot's choice was not a good one.
He pitched his tent near Sodom.
Mm-hmm. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly.
Okay, all right. So even though the land was good, the people that were there in that land, they were wicked.
Wicked.
Mhm.
Okay. After Lot had gone, God told Abram to look in all four directions, that all the land he could see would one day be given to his seed, which would be so numerous that he compared it to the dust of the earth in verse 16. From Genesis 15:5, tell what else his seed would be like.
Stars.
Okay.
Stars.
So, if you notice, Abram, he was in Canaan. And we just finished the lesson where after Israel had come out of bondage and they came to the Jordan, and Joshua took over after Moses, and they went into Canaan, and Canaan was that promised land. So here, God is telling Abram to look right there. Abram, he's in Canaan, and he's looking. God is telling him to look around. One day I'm going to promise all what you see. I'm going to give this to you.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's going to, that's not going to happen till sometime later. But at that time, Abram, he was in Canaan right there. Any questions? And I noticed, in fact, in several places in Genesis, God repeats his promises several times. The promise of he repeats his promise. Bad news for Abram's descendants. Bad news for Abram's descendants. While Abram was in a deep sleep, God said to him, know of a surety that thy seed will be a
Stranger.
in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them
400
400 years. Genesis 15:13. He said of their captives, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with a great substance. Verse 14. This took place after the death of Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And that was after the death of Joseph was when they were in bondage in Egypt. And Moses led them from that bondage, and they wandered around in the wilderness for like 40 years. And that's what God is telling, or in that dream, that's what God is telling Abram, that they're going to be that 400 years. That's how long they were in Egypt under bondage. Great disappointment, no heir yet, as yet. Great disappointment, no heir as yet. Abram and Sarah were getting older. Is there any questions, any comments down to this point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Abram and Sarah were getting older, And as they became anxious because they had not received a son, Sarah suggested that Abram have a child by Hagar, her handmaid, to which suggestion Abram agreed. And they had a son whose name was Ishmael. However, he was not the promised seed. How is the son described in Genesis 16:12?
There's a wild
A man
donkey.
and
Hand will
be
be
against
against every man.
every man and every
Okay.
man's hand.
Be a wild man.
Every man's hand would be against him.
Mhm.
God told Abram that his covenant with him was still valid and that he would be the father of many nations. He changed his name to Abraham, which means a father of many nations or father of a multitude. He also gave Abraham the ordinance of circumcision applicable to Abraham and to all his male descendants, as well as to those not his seed, but bought with his money. Basically, those were slaves. Everybody in his household, including his slaves, were subject to the circumcision.
Mhm.
And that the circumcision was, say where, okay, that was the circumcision God initiated circumcision as a sign of the covenant between him and Abraham.
Mhm.
That's when circumcision started, and that's Genesis 17 verses 10 and 11. The circumcision was a sign of the covenant between God's covenant with Abraham. I just lost my place. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Okay. God then changed Sarai's name to Sarah, which means princess. She would be a mother of nations, and kings of all, the kings of people shall be of her. Genesis 17, 15 through 16.
Mhm.
Any questions?
Do you think that was a lack of faith between Sarah and Abraham for not waiting on God for their child to come?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Do you think that was a lack of faith between Abraham and Sarah or lack of patience for them not waiting on God to do what he said he was going to do by bringing them an heir?
Mhm.
I think, well, yeah, if that would have been, I think it was the lack of patience because God had promised it, but they were old and they were getting older, and they hadn't seen their son. In fact, at one point, before Ishmael, Abraham had considered adopting a son. He considered adopting a son. But I wrote it. And that was, I guess, there he God had made that promise, and he knew that he was supposed to have an heir, but there was no heir, and so I guess Abraham, he was going to help God out a little bit, and by actually adopting a son. I got my notes over here. Looking, see where that's at.
Okay. I was going to ask you, I can't remember. We studied this before and I just can't, it escapes me. How many years was between Ishmael and and his brother.
Hmm.
There's a number of years there, right?
Well, not
Seems
really.
like Ishmael was when he 15 or 14 or 15.
Yeah, that's about right. Because
When
they were she was 90. 90 in her 90s when she had. Well, wait a minute.
No, Abraham was 90 years old. I remember that. Because that's at the end of
Sarah,
chapter
she died
17.
I think she was 127, 137 when she died.
Oh, here it is. Verse 25 of chapter 17. It said that Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old
Okay.
when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And the self same day was Abraham circumcised and Ishmael, his son. So that was when he was circumcised.
He was 13 when he was circumcised.
Right.
Okay.
And
The
then
next chapter is where the angels visit with the three men, the three angels visit with Abraham.
Hmm.
The birth of Isaac is in chapter 21. This you can see.
Read a lot of that. You should read a lot of that.
Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born.
Mhm.
That's in chapter 21, verse 5.
Mhm.
So he wasn't very much older than Ishmael.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, I didn't. Wish I'd written. I didn't. For some reason, I didn't make a note of where that was that Abram had considered adopting a son since
Hmm.
since he had
Oh, I see here it says, I looked up, it said the Bible said that Abraham was 86 when Ishmael was born, and he was 100 when Isaac was born. So
okay. So that's
if
14.
that's like 100 from 86 is, yeah. Whatever that is, I'm not good at adding in my head.
that's 14 years.
Yeah.
14 years.
Yeah.
Nathan, that's Genesis
Oh,
15:3, where he considered adopting
What chapter you
Eliezer.
say? Genesis what?
Genesis 15, verses 2 and 3.
15, 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Um,
And the word of the Lord came back to him in verse 4.
hmm?
I just said the word of the Lord came back to him, it says in verse 4, but it talked about that's part of the
Yeah,
adoption of
and,
Jewish law.
and 2 and 3 is where he's saying that he was going to well, in verse 3, and Abram said, behold, to me that has given no seed. Lo, one born in my house is mine heir. That one born in his house, he's referring to that, it's not his natural son, but he's born in his house.
Right.
And he's going to adopt him as his heir. And in verse 4, God is saying, behold, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him saying, this shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. So it's going to be his natural son.
Right.
It's going to, and not, this other son, not son, this other child that was born in his house.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bess.
You're welcome.
Now, tell me where I'm at. Okay, unexpected appears to appear at Abraham's tent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in Genesis 18, we find Abraham in the plains of Mamre, sitting in his tent door in the heat of the day. As he looked up, he saw three men whom he welcomed to his home. He had water brought to wash their feet, and then feed them a good country dinner of bread and butter and a calf, described as young, tender, and good, which they ate outside under a tree. These men had good news for Sarah and Abraham, news so good that it was hard to believe because of their age. This is what we're just talking about. Okay, but God was about to fulfill his promise of a son, the heir of whom they had yearned all through the years. When Sarah heard it, she even laughed within herself. God then said to Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? In verse 13. So she's laughing, I'm old. I can't have a child, that's
right.
God asked the question. And that question was, is anything too hard for the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
And he then said that Sarah definitely would have a child.
Mm-hmm.
And the three men are not called angels in this chapter, but in Hebrews 13:2 indicates that they were when it says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained
Angels.
unaware. If this is not a reference to Abraham and his hospitality to these three men, to whom else could it refer? After all, an angel is a messenger, and these men certainly had a message.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. what great compliment was paid to Abraham in Genesis 18:19.
Mhm.
1819, for I know him that he will command his children and his household.
He will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment.
Mhm.
And the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has.
Mhm.
And now the bad news.
Mhm.
Now the bad news. Because these same three men, when the men left Abraham's tent, he went with him. He went with him on the way for a while. And the men, excuse me, and the men left him and went toward Sodom. Abram concluded that the destruction of Sodom was at hand. He then asked God, "Wilt thou destroy the righteous with the wicked?"
Mhm.
He seemed to think that there might be 50 righteous people in the city, but there was not. Abraham kept lowering the number until he reached 10, but not even 10 righteous people could be found in Sodom. And that number included Lot's family. Later, 2 angels visited Lot. The men of Sodom tried to overcome the angels in Lot's house, but were smitten with blindness. Lot's guests then advised him to bring out from the city his kin, sons-in-law, his kin, sons-in-law, sons and daughters. They also said, "For we will
Destroy.
this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord will have sent us to destroy." Genesis 19:3. Lot had been in Sodom long enough that some of his family had become saturated in the ways of their city. For in Genesis 19:4 says, "And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-laws, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." But he seemed as one that
Mocked.
unto his sons-in-laws. The next morning, the angels tried to hasten Lot to take his wife and 2 daughters and flee, but Lot hesitated. The angels took Lot, his wife, and the 2 daughters by the hand and brought them without the city and said, "Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest thou be consumed." In verse 17. So Lot's son-in-laws, they were so wrapped up in in that city, they were consumed. Well, they were, I think the word that they were so saturated in the city. They were so affected by that city that they stayed behind, and they were destroyed with the city. The Lord then rained down brimstone and fire upon Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot's wife looked back and became a
Pillar of
Pillar
salt.
of salt.
pillar of salt. Verses 24 through 26. Lot and his 2 daughters lived in the cave in the mountains. In verse 30. Verse 30. Okay.
Mhm.
And that Lot and his daughters in that mountain. We talked about that a few weeks ago. where his daughters tricked him,
Mhm.
and there was incest, and from where his daughter had a child by Lot, and that was Moab. That's where the Moabites came from. Something we talked about 2 weeks ago. The Isaac in and Ishmael out. What time is it? Okay. Is there any comments or any questions here?
Both of them actually laid with their father.
Say it again.
Both of them, the firstborn and the younger sister, both lay with their father.
Yeah, they did.
And
They
one had a Moab, and then the other one was was it Bienemy or B?
I got the other one's name.
Bienami.
See
Isaac in and Ishmael out. In Genesis 21, we have the birth of Isaac, family. Okay. He grew, and when he was weaned, Abraham gave a great feast in his honor. But Sarah saw Ishmael mocking, and she gave orders that the son of Hagar be cast out. Abraham was very much grieved over Sarah's ultimatum. But God told him to listen to Sarah, and he assured Abraham that Ishmael would also become a great nation. Abraham then sent Hagar and Ishmael away. He grew up in the wilderness and became an
Archer.
Archer. And here,
21:20, Genesis 21:20. Later, Hagar took him a wife out of the land of
Egypt.
21. How? Let's see. How was God assured Abraham that Ishmael will become a great nation. How did he become a great nation? Not a whole lot. Notice he had promised that he would be that his sons would be princes. Genesis 25:12-18. Genesis 25:12-18.
He said it will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. It's in Genesis 17.
Okay. And now you're reading that from Message.
That was in Genesis 17.
16, okay, okay.
17.
17.
Mm-hmm.
17 verses what?
I'm trying to find the verse. Nathan.
But
It's in verse 20.
Verse 20. Verse 20.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 Okay. If you look over at Genesis 25, verse 12,
Mm-hmm.
it talks about the descendants of Ishmael.
Mhm.
And let's see. Let's read this real quick. Just now let's start over here with Cindy and read verses 12, please. Cindy.
What chapter we on? Chapter what? 20,
Genesis chapter 25,
25 and verse what?
verse
12.
12.
Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's sons, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Bessie.
And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their nations according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, I can't pronounce these, and Kedar, and Adbeel, and Mibsam.
Mm-hmm.
See, Deborah.
14, and Mishma and Duma and Massa.
Massa.
Go ahead and do 15 too.
Hadar and Tema, Jetor, Nepish, and Kedema.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Jay, are you over there at chapter
Yes.
6, 25, verse 16?
Okay. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their named by the towns and by the casters. 12 princes according to the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Then Nelly, number 17.
Number 17. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, and 137 years. And he gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So those were his sons, and that was God's blessing. You know, they talk about the 12 princes that he had promised.
Right.
And I got, beyond that, I didn't find a whole lot more about Ishmael. That's it. Okay. We'll stop right there. I see it's 6:50 right now. Mark your books right there. We'll stop right there at Isaac in and Ishmael out. And
that where we're going to start next week, Brother Nathan? Or we're going to start at Abraham's greatest test of faith? We're going to start back up there where
Yeah.
Yeah, we answered that one.
Oh, we did that, didn't we? Yeah, right. Abraham's greatest test of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Days of second.
Okay. We'll pick up there next week. And we're looking at Abram, or his name was changed to Abraham, and his faith in God. God had him to do very, very difficult thing to leave his homeland, to leave his family, or his kindred. He left them and just take off and went where God would show him to go later. He didn't know where he was going when he left. And we see Abraham, if you look over in Hebrew, he's listed as the Hall of Fame there in Hebrews 11, and it talks about his faith. And that kind of faith, it's not an easy thing to have. God expects us to have a faith, a strong faith in him. And I don't know that he would test us in this sort of way, but our faith should be in God, that he will deliver us. And he's made us a promise of salvation, eternal salvation, if we're just faithful to him. That's where our faith comes in. And our faith is trusting that God will keep his promise, that there is a heaven. And if we do the things that he has commanded us to do, to have a part of his heaven, if we've heard the gospel and we believe it, and repent of all of our past sins and confess Christ as Lord, and then be baptized, then we'll gain a home in that heaven that he has promised. And it's our faith that we're doing these things. Faith. And once we're in the church, then we, if while we're in the church, if we can still fail, we can still fall, and we don't have to be baptized for the second time. But when we realize that we're in error, we ask the church to pray for us, and we ask God to forgive us. And there again, we're faithful that he will forgive us. And if there's anyone that would like to do either of these things at this time, you may do so as Larry to lead us in the song.
Jesus is tenderly calling thee home.
Calling today,
Calling today, why from the sunshine of love wilt I roam?
farther and farther away. Calling today, calling today. Jesus is tenderly calling today.
I was gonna comment on before you started singing, but I think Brother Story, that's the preacher that we had Sunday, he gave a great example, I think, on testing our faith. Like Abraham's faith was tested by God asking him to take his only son's life. But sometimes, like Brother Story said, when we pray for things and God doesn't answer, and we don't know why we're having to wait so long for something to come, or why he doesn't answer it the way we want to answer, but we continue to serve him anyway. That's, I think he gave a great illustration of how our faith is tested today.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's true. And it, make a note of that, Cindy. And there's part of Abraham's faith, God promised him that land, the promised land. He promised Abraham that he would have that land, told him to look around, that he was going to give it to him, but Abraham never saw it, because that didn't happen until after Israel had to go through the things that they went through, and then crossing the Jordan. So Abraham never saw that. But that's we'll make a note, Cindy, and we'll talk about that some more next week.
Okay.
Good. Anybody got any announcements? This coming Sunday, brother Roderick Chun, he'll be speaking this coming Sunday.
Okay.
And
We've had him before.
no. Roderick, I'm not sure how old Roderick is. I keep thinking of him as a young man, because he grew up over there at Birch Street, and saw him as a young man, but he's probably maybe 40s.
Probably.
I would
Yeah,
say
probably.
he's 40. I think he is around Brittany them's age.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
But he worshiped at Sand Hill, and I guess he was living in Antioch, and I guess he still lives up that way, but he worshiped at Sand Hill, and he preached occasionally at Sand Hill. With Everett Nelson minister over there. So
Is he a possible candidate, or he just filling in for just like Brother Story and them just filling in for?
not that I know of. Actually, I haven't had that type of discussion with Roderick. But basically he's just speaking for us Sunday.
Okay.
Now if after he speaks Sunday, somebody says, hey, we'd like to have him, then maybe we would expand our conversation,
Okay.
He did speak at the
You
camp.
understand what I'm saying?
When he speak at the camp,
Can what?
Huh?
he spoke at the camp one year.
Yeah.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he spoke at camp. It's been several years ago. He did did a couple of classes down there for us. Yeah. And okay. Okay, if nobody, let's see. Happy birthday, LB and JB. Hope you all had a good birthday yesterday.
Yes, sir. Thank you a lot. Thank you.
Okay, all righty. And let's see, what is it? Friday, Barbara's birthday. Look forward to happy birthday Friday, Barbara.
Well, thank you.
And let's see, Sunday was Matt and Latoya's anniversary. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd like to ask Brother JB to dismiss us, please.
Brother Nathan,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to just add continuance prayer for my family. just to continue to, just uplift us and give us strength, and continue to pray for my husband as he's still going through the grieving process of losing his mother, and just continue to pray for our family, please.
Okay, Rashida.
Mhm.
Okay.
Let's pray. Our Father God in heaven, we come at this time thanking thee for the opportunity that we had tonight to come and to study and to meditate on your word. So thankful, dear God, for blessing us and guiding us through this day. We ask you to bless those that ask prayer, that give them the opportunity they can come to you and ask forgiveness and ask for prayer. Dear God, we ask you to watch over and guide us as we go through the rest of this day. We ask you, dear God, to bless us and be with us through this night. Wake us up to the new day, if it be thy will. Oh, we bless and we ask it all in our Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Man. Phew.
Man.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank
Thank
you, Brother Nathan.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, all.
Hey,
Happy
Good night.
birthday, happy
Have a good
birthday,
evening.
Jay and Elle and
Yeah.
Miss Barbara.
yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All righty. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Brother Nathan,
Yes, sir.
are they still on the prayer list? Sister Rashida and them? Can we add them to the prayer list too, their family?
Okay, yeah. She's off. Cindy, what's Rashida's last name?
Flemings.
Clemens. That's Flint with an S on the end.
Yes.
You said that. Ooh.
Rashida Flemings. Okay.
All right, thank you, Brother Nathan. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.